Welcome. This presentation is presented by the Office of Special Education and Early Learning in the Kentucky Department of Education. This module covers the management of students with disabilities during transport.
The videos in this series may be used as a training tool to support school districts when planning and implementing transportation for students with disabilities. The video series is intended to be used in conjunction with the Guidance for Special Transportation in Kentucky document linked here, which covers a variety of topics relating to transporting students with disabilities, including those covered in the Special Transportation 101 training videos. A district is only obligated to provide special transportation when the student's Admissions and Release Committee team or 504 team determines it is necessary to address the individual needs of the student. The ARC or 504 team may need to discuss the student's behavior issues with transportation so that they may be addressed through strategies, accommodations, goals, or by other means to address the student's individual needs. The Kentucky Administrative Regulations, or KARs, require that local school districts ensure that a student's individual education program, or IEP, include information about behavior interventions, is readily available to staff who are responsible for IEP and Behavior Intervention Program, or BIP, implementation. When considering behavior management of students with disabilities without special transportation, school transportation staff should be fully informed of behavioral strategies and supports that are listed in the IEP or the Behavior Intervention Plan, and of their specific responsibilities related to its implementation, even if the student does not receive special transportation. The Admissions and Release Committee, or ARC, should communicate with transportation staff information about how to provide and implement the behavior supports and strategies, which may include the need for training. School transportation staff and special education staff are responsible for ensuring that the IEP and the behavior intervention plan are fulfilled on the school bus. When there are concerns related to special transportation, the parent or the local school district's transportation director should contact the district's Director of Special Education, also known as the DOS, or 504 coordinator, to discuss the need for an ARC or 504 meeting to determine how best to address the concerns. When discussing these matters, don't forget about confidentiality needs, such as the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, a law that protects the privacy of student education records. This is discussed in a separate video in the training series. Next, we're going to cover bus suspensions. Whether a bus suspension should count as a day of suspension would depend on whether the bus transportation is a part of the child's IEP. If the bus transportation were a part of the child's IEP, a bus suspension would be treated as a suspension under the federal regulation unless the public agency provides the bus service in some other way, because that transportation is necessary for the student to obtain access to the location where services will be delivered. Now, if the bus transportation is not a part of the child's IEP, a bus suspension is not a suspension under the federal regulations. In those cases, the student and the student's parents have the same obligations to get the student to and from school as a non-disabled student who has been suspended from the bus. However, districts should consider whether the behavior on the bus is similar to behavior in a classroom that is addressed in the IEP, and whether the child's behavior on the bus should be addressed in the IEP or in a behavioral intervention plan for that student. Because the determination as to whether an in-school suspension or bus suspension counts as a day of suspension under the federal regulations depends on the unique circumstances of each case. Chapter 4B of the guidance document at the beginning of the video discusses more on change of placements due to disciplinary actions and manifestation determinations. Now we'll cover physical restraint and seclusion. Whether physical restraints or seclusion is appropriate depends upon the student's needs. For example, a student's ARC or 504 team may decide the student needs a specific assigned seat on the bus to prevent disruptions in routine. Or the team may determine that the student often gets into altercations with another rider on the bus, and those two students need to be separated. It may be appropriate to include such an arrangement in the student's behavior intervention plan. However, only use physical restraint in an emergency where the student is in danger or is a danger to themselves or others. Don't discriminate against students with disabilities by using restraint in situations where you wouldn't restrain non-disabled students. Don't use restraint as a punishment. The use of mechanical restraint, such as a safety harness, by itself is not an appropriate behavior management technique. And finally, the appropriateness of a physical restraint depends on how it is used and if the student's behavior raises significant safety concerns that warrants the use. And also appropriately train bus staff who must employ any restraints or seclusion. More information is available in the resources listed below. And I want to mention that there are also physical restraint and seclusion modules that go over what are appropriate practices and prohibited practices that are available on the web pages available at the end of this video series. This PT versus Jefferson County Board of Education case was over the use of a safety harness due to behavior concerns. The district did not deny a free appropriate public education, or FAPE, to the student and was permitted to use a safety harness on a student who had autism on the bus because that student's violent behavioral outburst posed a serious risk of bodily injury to the driver and other passengers of the bus. If a student with a disability repeatedly has behavioral incidents on the bus that result in the student needing to be physically restrained, that's a sign that the student's behavior management plan may not be working and may need to be revised. Staff should convene the student's IEP or 504 team to reassess the student's needs and to develop an effective behavior management plan. Best practice is to conduct a functional behavioral assessment, specifically assessing the student's behavior in the context of the bus environment and those potential triggers. More information is provided in section 4D of the guidance document. Now we'll address service animals and how it applies to transportation. The Kentucky's Guidance for Special Transportation in Kentucky document in Chapter 4 provides specific information on the use of service animals. The use of service animals is not specifically addressed under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, or Section 504. However, the use of certain service animals is governed by both Titles II and III of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. In fact, the 2010 amendments to the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, include specifics about what service animals are allowed and not allowed. District or schools may not ask for documentation of training or proof of certification of the service animal. It is permissible for a school or district to inquire as to the specific task or tasks that the service animal performs and proof of vaccination as required for the animal under state or local law. Now I'll share some supports and resources that are available. When a bus driver or transportation staff member observes that a student with a disability is exhibiting recurring behavioral issues on the school bus, the staff should report this behavior to the school principal or district transportation director. The district's transportation director may need to share concerns with the preschool coordinator, the district's director of special education, or the 504 coordinator for guidance. It's important for districts to have processes and procedures in place for transportation staff and building administrators to know what steps to take next. In many cases, the special education director or 504 coordinator will need to be informed of the concerns in order to address them appropriately through an ARC or 504 meeting. If staff are still unsure or need additional help, any district staff may contact the Kentucky Department of Education Pupil Transportation Branch in the Division of District Support, or they may contact the Kentucky Department of Education Office of Special Education and Early Learning, the Guidance and Support Branch, for additional help. Districts also have access to the Special Education Regional Technical Assistance Centers, known as SURTACs, for assistance, training, and support. There is also a video series on effective classroom strategies for students with disabilities on the Behavior Resources page and on the KDE Media portal. Strategy 9 of the video series includes a video on strategies to support school bus behavior. More information on special education, IEPs, and special transportation, as well as contact information for the Guidance and Support Branch, is available on the ARC and IEP page of the KDE website.
Thank you for what you do to keep our students safe.